a high school Israel education and advocacy program called Right On for Israel. Some of you may be familiar with it. Gary Rosenblatt of the Jewish Week in New York created the program 5 years ago, 6 years ago now. 4 years ago it came to Chicago. We're working with high school juniors and seniors, really trying to prepare people so that when they hit the ground and they enter college as a freshman, they won't have to go through that stage of being shocked, of being overwhelmed, of not knowing what the Nakba is, of hearing all the terrible things that the Israelis did, feeling ignorant, feeling cheated by the people who gave them education up until that point. And in so many cases what we've seen is these young college students feel overwhelmed, feel outmanned, feel like they've been lied to all the time. They step away from the whole world of Israel. Often they step away from any Jewish involvement in campuses. I spoke in some research I did a couple of years ago. I was at a Jewish high school in Los Angeles, the Milken School. They said that in 2001 and 2002, they had their recent graduates coming back and visiting and saying to the dean of students, "You cheated us. You lied to us. You told us everything was wonderful and you told us all these nice things. We got to college and we got slapped around and we don't know anything. And you didn't teach us." And high school is the time, if not before that, to address that. Once they've gotten to college, if they don't know anything, but we're lucky enough that they care and they want to know something, that's sort of the core within the core that we're privileged to work with in a program like Israeli Moon.
Yosef?
My name is Yosef Hakimian. I'm Iranian born. Some of my friends have teased me about saying Iranian born Jew, so I would not say that today. I've lived in the United States for about 40 plus years, and now I'm here. One of the things that you did not mention, and this is a question, is that you did not mention University of Southern Illinois University, SIU, and the reason I know about that because I was ADL chairman in Missouri Regional and Southern Illinois, and I know that there is a lot of activity in Carbondale and also Edwardsville, but I think St. Louis can take care of that. Okay, that's one. And the other one is that, once again, people who know me, they've heard me say it very often. I'll start by telling about somebody who was my friend, quote unquote, in college in the 50s. His name was Azmi Chazin. Azmi Chazin was son of the mayor of Nazareth. He was in St. Louis. He was a Christian Arab from Nazareth, except that he was one thing at a time. In the YMCA, I remember, he would be Christian. With the Muslim students, he was a Muslim. He was an Arab. Not a Muslim, I'm sorry. He was an Arab. And when he wanted some things for the Jewish community, which he did, and it took plenty, this is very one thing at a time. This basically is the kind of adversity that we're facing. I'll simplify it, and I hope that I'm being helpful by doing this. There are two things that is very, very common, two pillars that I think Arab propaganda and its success rests on. One is lies. They have absolutely, positively no problem, and anybody who wants to argue, I'm willing to sit down, and I'll buy you even dinner, and I'll argue with them about that one for 5 hours. They lie. Just simple as that. Lying is a way of life. And then the other one is that you cannot be a human being and go to some of those Arabs whose grandfather moved from whatever area they lived in within Israel of today. You have to feel sorry for them, except what they do very cleverly, they disguise why they went into exile. And why is it that they are still refugees 60 years later? I have been to Pakistan many times, not in the past 10 or 15 years, but before that, many times. And I saw there are 15 million refugees as a result of partition of India. Those people got settled within about 4 or 5 years. I have still friends, I can name names, that they were born, or the parents were born in what was India, and they came to Pakistan, and they're Muslim. I believe that this ought to be pointed out to American people. And just one last item. Recently, in about 3 months ago, somebody showed me an ad in real estate, concerning real estate. One of the princes of, and I don't think he's a prince, but he calls himself that, of Saudi Arabia, who was the ambassador to America, to the United States. He was putting his vacation home in Colorado, in Aspen, Colorado, on sale for the measly sum of $135 million. Okay, I told one of my Muslim friends in the United States, show me that this guy has given $1 million in his entire life, and I'll give $1,000 to one of the favorite charities. And I don't care even if it's Hamas or whatever. Okay, I think that this ought to be what ought to be pointed out to American people, that they lie and they have created a problem. They don't give a damn about their own people. They have created a problem, and the problem is perpetuated by the oligarchs, plutocrats, dictators, theocrats who are ruling them, and therefore it's very easy to blame it on this. It's all is
It is, isn't it?
yeah.
Interesting points. You mentioned SIU, Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. We made a strategic decision as we were launching Israeli Mood that we could not be everywhere at the same time. We chose the 5 schools that I mentioned. At a variety of other schools, Southern Illinois included, I've been doing outreach and trying to work with whatever Hillel or pro-Israel infrastructure exists in order to try to set up sort of one-time workshops to work with active students, committed students, to get a sense from them of what they feel they need, how they feel I or any others might be helpful, and to try to see if there might be a foundation on which to build a more intensive long-term program. I was at Southern Illinois University 5 weeks ago after working with the Hillel director and some others for several weeks to set up an evening encounter where I was promised that it would be a small but committed group of 10 Jewish students. There were 4. It was a 6-hour trip to get there and a 6-hour trip to get back. And without in any way minimizing the importance of reaching a campus that has more than 20,000 students, that has plenty of people who have never met a Jew, plenty of people who are very open to any anti-Israel message they hear, plenty of Arab and Arab sympathizing students on campus. It's important to reach there. It's a question of prioritizing. I probably won't go back there this year. I would hope that I would go back there next year. But to be honest, if they can't pull together more than 4 people, 2 of whom leave 30 minutes into the discussion because they have dinner cooking at home, it's probably not going to be a place that, there's only so much that can be brought to someone if there isn't some sense that there's even a tiny core, but a core of people willing to take some responsibility and run with some initiatives on their own. It's unfortunate, but that's where we are on SIU.
Can I just say one thing? I know the director of Jewish Community Relations Council in St. Louis. Her name is Batya Goldstein. His son, as a matter of fact. If you want to, I can put you in touch with
I know
her.
Batya. I haven't talked to Batya about Southern Illinois,
Okay.
but I know Batya. Maybe I should.
Okay.
Thank you.
Andre Ogola.
Again, a couple of points, some of them very brief. Yep. Okay, my name's Andre Ogola. I'm a Legacy Heritage Fellow here at the moment. I'm the former National Secretary of the Union of Jewish Students in the UK. The first thing I'll say is just a very practical thing. You want to get people committed to the programme from start to finish. Money is the most useful thing you can do here. Not to give the students, but to give them preferential treatment. But if they commit, if they complete the course, when they want to run something on campus, they will have a direct priority route to get funding to run the programs they want to run. I don't know if that means additional money or you can fiddle it around, but that's what you give. No, not bribery for students. Something that the students will be given the resources to say, you do the training, we make sure that you're able to do things, and then we'll facilitate you actually doing them on the ground. UJS in the UK runs things similar but different. I think there's a very good mix between what you've got here and the sort of thing they do. I'd urge you to be in touch with them, with Yair, who's the campaigns director. What they don't have that you have, that I think is very important, is the actual educational material. There is a lot of advocacy training. There is a lot of education on things like Hamas, on things like the various right-wing, left-wing Islamist groups in the UK. The Jewish students probably know as much, the activists know as much as the security services in the UK, because we get the same reports, we're trained on the same materials. But the actual history material, I think, is important. What they do differently is they gather the people together. They have a residential, and it's limited normally to a few people per campus, and that becomes your activists on a national level. I think there's a position for that for the smaller campuses. Rather than you spending 6 hours travelling to meet 4 people, rather pay the travelling costs for 4 people to come and spend 2-3 days with you, but 4 people from all the campuses you can't otherwise reach, and then send them back. I think that there's also something to be said for the graduate side of this. You spoke about graduate students. That's somewhere where the UK falls short. We end up putting first-year students in debate up against PhD students. PhD students in field, in history, in Islamic studies, etc. It doesn't work. So I think, again, maybe a residential type program or something for the graduate students to bring them together and to work out how to integrate them with the other students, but without pushing the leadership further up. The leadership needs to stay with the junior students, with the graduate students able to come as speakers, able to get involved, able to do more of the live responsive events. The last point I want to make, if you want to talk offline, that would be good too. The other thing the UK has is a centralisation of information. Programs, responses are decided locally, except obviously for what comes through nationally, but whatever happens locally is reported back in real time. If there is a problem on a campus, there will be, I think normally it's 2 or 3 phone calls made. A student spots something, the phone call goes to the campaigns person on that campus, or the chairperson of the HILO, etc., if there isn't a campaigns person. That person calls through to the national office in London and says, this is the situation, this is happening now. The London office or the person on campus calls through to the Jewish Security Organisation. It means everyone is on the page and everyone is on the same page immediately. From there, stuff may go through to the Israeli embassy if materials are needed. It may go through to the community organisations if it's needed. There's whole plans for how to deal with these negative things at different political levels. But within an hour of something actually happening, it's filtered through the system in a very streamlined fashion that people at least know who's handling it and what's happening. I think we could do something similar here. I don't know who would be responsible for it, but there should be a number that can be called, either state-based or nationally. I'll leave it there so other people can speak, but if you want to talk more afterwards, I'm more than happy to.
Terrific, I'd love that. Interestingly, one of the first things that one of the Hillel representatives said to us when we presented this program in the summer was, we need to pay students to come. They were talking about, I don't even remember, it might have been attend all 8 seminars and get a $300 stipend. Many of us, that was my first reaction was, I don't like that. What message is that sending? And to which I was told, be realistic. You want them to come, that will make them come. There are plenty of examples in the States. I'm not aware of it in Israel-related programming. I am aware of it in religious kiruv kind of programming. Come to the 10 seminars, get $300, get $500, whatever the amount is. You miss one, and you no longer qualify for any stipend. We took the position that we didn't feel that what we were offering was so horrific that we had to bribe people, as someone here whispered, that we didn't feel we had to bribe people to come. I love the idea, though, of guaranteeing a preferential track for funding of campaigns and activities on your campus, and I think that definitely can have a place. I also like the notion of doing a regional intensive over 2, 3, 4 days, or maybe 2 weekends in the course of a year, something like that, particularly for students from more remote campuses. We've come at it from a perspective that says, based on experience, students don't like to travel more than once for something off of their campus. They're much more likely to come to something on a continual basis if it's local on their campus or right in their environment. The only reason we've got 2 schools, the University of Illinois at Chicago and Loyola University, joining together, is that we had decided to offer a program at Loyola, and there was a mini crisis at the University of Illinois in Chicago. I was brought in to talk to some of the student leaders. We worked through some things. They had heard about Israeli Mood. They said, why can't we have it here? Can we maybe go to Loyola and do it with them? When it's their idea, they loved it, and they'll be carpooling and doing it together starting in about 2 weeks. But I think it definitely is worth looking at the possibility of bringing students from some of the SIUs and other smaller, more remote campuses together, see if that might be able to be an approach.
The only thing I'll add on that is if you do run a residential or something, what we've seen in the UK, people were dropping out and people stopped coming to these in the last couple of years, and it's largely a financial thing. You need to pay for transport.
Oh, that would need to be, yeah,
you
sure.
need, and also organise it for them. Tell them, we will pick you up locally from here, there will be a bus, there will be a taxi, there will be a whatever. Make it not their problem,
Right.
because that's a hurdle that they often don't get past. And if that's the only thing stopping someone being an activist on campus, that would be a real shame, and it's easily fixed.
Sure.
You asked for some suggestions in terms of what should be concentrated on, and I don't think there's much to add. What you're doing is the basic. I would only say that from my experience, the two most important areas to concentrate on are first the narrative. I think if we don't get the narrative right, everything else falls apart. And the narrative has to be precisely the origins of the state and the wars, what caused the wars, because if they have the answer to that, then they have the answer to a lot of the other stuff that comes. And what I'm saying is obvious, I'm not really telling anything new. And the second thing is, I think someone else mentioned, to have the case to the Arabs and the answer, backwards and forwards, myths and facts, that sort of approach. I would like to share with you, though, an interesting experience that I had when I went back to Australia 4 years ago, and it's very relevant to the sort of problems that you're describing. The Australian Jewish community is a unique community in the sense that it probably has a more Zionist and a more Jewish base than any other Anglo-Saxon Jewish community. The vast majority of the kids go to Jewish day schools till university. When I went back there, I decided that I'd do a run of the major Jewish day schools, the seniors of the major Jewish day schools in Melbourne and Sydney. And when I did do that, I got such a shock, because precisely what you've been describing. After the 1990s, complacency set in, and kids that were well versed in Jewish values, kids who were religious, just had no idea about how to cope with the struggle. And I remember I called the Jewish community leaders together and I warned them they were facing a catastrophe. And they were, because the kids that came with that sort of background at university, they just weren't centres of activism to direct. And what we did, we introduced an intensive series of courses along the lines that I've discussed with you and the sort of thing that you're doing yourself at the last year of high school in Jewish schools. And we discovered that the remarkable thing is that within 1 year, the whole area had been transformed. Because once these kids came into university, you already had a core. And if you've got the core, then the rest grows. And it's much more difficult in the United States because you don't have these Jewish centers. But where you do have areas where Jews are concentrated before they go, if you can get at them before they go to the campus, before they're out there, it makes things a lot easier, because once they're there, it's much more difficult. But if they get the grounds and the basis beforehand, and if there are ways to work in with Jewish day schools, with synagogues and temples where they do have some sorts of activities, and get them at that point, to my mind, if you can get them and give them that kind of rudimentary structure beforehand, it'll make a difference between day and night.
Excellent, excellent points. I guess the challenge in the United States is that young people go off to,
Yes.
obviously there are thousands of colleges, they don't go to all of them, but young people go off to dozens of colleges and universities. I can tell you that from Right On for Israel in Chicago, we have graduated 2 groups. It's a handful of kids because they were both small groups. We've got 30-something graduates of the program. About a third of them are currently studying in various gap year programs here, which they haven't even gotten to campus yet. But we were just doing some follow-up of where are our alumni now and what are they doing. And I sort of knew it independently, but looking at it together, it was very interesting. We've got, I believe, 4 students out of our 30-some alumni were studying at Columbia University in New York. Two of them are on the, I believe, 5-member board of the Lion Pack, which is the largest pro-Israel Jewish student organization on campus. One of them, just this month, is becoming the president. The other one is also an officer. Unfortunately, we like to laugh about it. We're having such amazing impact at a school that has a huge Jewish population, obviously many challenges, but also many capable people to address them. Our students, our alumni have risen already to the top in that environment. I just wish that they were going in significant numbers to some other schools that could use that kind of a shot in the arm. But I think as years pass, as there aren't 30 alumni, but there are 130 alumni, as there are more out there in the system, we have the same chance to shift the reality. Would that we could go to the Jewish day schools and do a program like what you're talking about. I know that some day schools have done similar things. Many day schools bring their senior class on a several-week or even longer trip to Israel. The focus of those trips tends to not be speaking up for Israel, that serving many other important other purposes. Would that they would introduce a track that would encourage students and give students a feeling that they're empowered to speak up and to try to change the environment. I think we'd all benefit from that.
Michael Bunstein.
Michael, I'm a student at Hebrew U and I intern here at the center. First thing has already been said, but teaching not about Israel but about the Arabs and the Palestinians is very important, but that only is base for, I wanted to say sometimes very good strategy is to attack, not to defend, because when you defend, you just listen, you just get it on you, and you're calling for more of it. So just to attack, and here you just show the bad sides of the bad sides of the other side, the illnesses, the sins. For example, just as a short line. Palestinians have been betrayed by their leadership, and all they are they're just a means. The nation as nation has been betrayed. So a very good way of teaching your students how to just attack, to get to to the other grounds, to take the battle from our grounds to their grounds and to attack. The other thing in America, maybe especially with the is to not to sometimes emphasize Israel's case, but to emphasize American interest. Just to find points for, not to say this is good for Israel and we need to be this and that, but to show that, to find these points which can be said about this is American interest that this happens, that something should be happening in this way. This is American interest, and people here said about lies of the other side. So, in attacking the other side, you should use the truth all the time, and just to show how they lie. When you say truth, true stuff, and show they lie, that's it.
Terrific. 3 people have now mentioned, and because it was always in a long list of other things I've not responded, 3 people have mentioned the importance of presenting, exploring, getting young people acquainted with the other narrative, the Palestinian narrative, what they're going to encounter when they get out there. This is something that, in the framework of Israeli Mood, we're doing that. We haven't actually done it yet because we're in the most advanced campus. We're only halfway through the year-long program, but it is up in the next couple of workshops to be looking at some of the key arguments or positions or views that you're likely to encounter and deconstructing them. It's also something that we do extensively, really, in all of the high school work that I do, because as each of you have said, you're absolutely right. You can get someone feeling real confident in their own argument, in their own perspective, put them up against something that tries to knock it down, and if it comes at them out of the blue, they're not going to be prepared, and that may take the wind out of them just long enough to make them crawl away and feel helpless. So it's very important that their introduction to a Palestinian narrative not come from a Palestinian on the quad in front of 100 people, but that it come in a safe environment where they can explore it, analyze it, and come to grips with it, and find out what's real about it and what's not real about it, and be ready for it.
Something else, you are speaking about funding, and not funding, but scholarships or for some incentive for students. So just an idea for young people, maybe some Israeli movies, which will be showing true Israel, like in different colors, because Israeli movies are so truthful. They just speak about everything here. So you could just say, like, each time you could, like, if it's 2 hours, a meeting of 2 hours, like a short break for coffee, and then a movie of an hour and a half. So people get it just after being there, so they want to come. Like it's not about it's
Interesting idea.
just for students who like they're also looking for fun, I guess. So
Some of them can be quite counterproductive too.
yeah.
Depends which
Exactly.
films you choose.
Little fish mouth.
Okay, Carol, thank you very much for the presentation. It's very, very interesting. And the questions which you circulated, you asked, history is important. And I think it is, and I'd like to give you a few separate facts. There was the head of intelligence in the Israeli army during the 60s was Shufrat Harkabi, and he studied the Palestinians and their reasoning and also the Arab countries. He was a scholar of the first generation, and his observation was that the grievance of the Arabs and of the Palestinians could not be satisfied without the destruction of the state of Israel. And he said that they had gone to very great efforts to conceal that fact. And so when one deals with the Palestinians, he said, this is the point of their greatest vulnerability. Now, since this is an ideological conflict, nothing has changed since then. And it still is, the fact that they are not prepared to accept the compromise, they can talk of compromise, or come to a negotiation and pick up things in a process, but they will never close the deal, is their greatest weakness. And why they won't accept the two-state solution is because if they accept the issue is closed, there's no more grievance. So it is necessary to expose the real nature of their strategy, and this is a form of political warfare and propaganda. The other thing is we have a fellow by the name of Mr. Windmuller, what was his first name?
Steve?
Steve, I think, yeah, from HUC, and he said, he emphasized the point, and we know it, that one of the greatest enemies of Israeli Hezbollah has been the Israeli Foreign Ministry. And in, let's say, the early 90s, they felt that they had a deal, and once the deal was done, there would be the end of anti-Semitism, and there would be no longer any conflict, and we would enter into a messianic period. And a lot of people are still looking for the golden pot at the end of the rainbow and not fighting the fight. And it's very hard for them to admit that they are Jews and to fight the war. So we have this ambivalence. Also, Harkabi in his time said that the Israeli Foreign Ministry refused to distribute the Palestinian Charter because they wanted to conceal the fact that Israel actually had enemies. And so what Wendler said, and what we know, is that the state of Israel dismantled the advocacy apparatus in the early part of the 90s, and we're actually rebuilding it despite them. It's sort of like the struggle for Soviet Jewry, which was waged despite the state of Israel. So this is something, a few other things. The terms like apartheid state and the use of the accusation of genocide and ethnic cleansing comes from Soviet propaganda of the Cold War. I've written about it. It comes from a place, and Carter used Soviet terminology that was a point that I made. There is a line, and a lot of it comes from Ramallah, and in San Francisco, there's also a concentration of people. And these people have they use the same language, there is a line. They work our enemy works in a certain way. They try to have what is called uniformity of the coherence of their message, but they are decentralized also because they're afraid of the law, but it's the coherence of the message. And they have to be taken on. And the organization is very similar to that of the free speech movement of the 1960s in America. Just like Andre, if you want to talk about it more, I'll tell you more. And there's two last points. Immediately, I've studied the situation of the Israeli Arabs after 1948. And what happened to the Israeli Arabs and the Arabs here was that their leadership fled, mostly Hajj al-Husseini, because the Palestinians were associated with the Axis powers. So the Palestinians who remained in Israel, the Israeli Arabs, their main accusation was that their leadership had betrayed them.
Mm-hmm.
But later, since the leadership was not around so that they could blame them, and they wouldn't take the responsibility, they shifted the blame onto the state of Israel. And if we look back to history, this is the operation which really took place. And then, just one question that I'd like you to address. Sometimes I write I have a column, or I write in the newspapers, and I give my email, and I got a letter from a very sincere lady, Baltimore. I don't think that she was an academic. She was very sincere. I don't think she was